Hi everyone, I'm Bakhtawar and this is my channel, Book Bakht. I talk about books, I review them, I do hauls, vlogs, stuff like that. If that's something that you're interested in, do consider subscribing. So lately I've taken it upon myself to bring you some what you might consider hidden gems of Pakistani fiction. I find that if you're looking for something subpar from anywhere in the world, you're likely to find it. That's why at this point in time, it only makes sense for me to make videos and books that I actually like and books that had a profound effect on me, as opposed to making them on every book I read, because that would just waste a lot of time, really. So I present to you Wild Boar in the Cane Field by author Anniqua Rana. And this is published by Folio Books, which is a Pakistani publisher based in Lahore, I believe. So this is a work of magical realism, very much like the novel that I reviewed recently, Melody of a Tear. So this has elements of the fantastical blended in with, normal day-to-day life. And it is a story of a young girl, a bit of a Bildungsroman, like a coming of age story. I hope that's how you pronounce it. So it's like a coming of age story of a young girl who was abandoned as a baby on a train by her birth mother, and she is subsequently rescued by a village heiress named Bibi Safia and her maid servant slash reluctant best friend. And they sort of bring the girl up, and she does household chores and everything. She refers to herself as the servant child of Bibi Safia, the heiress. So before I get into any of the sort of subtleties of the novel, I would like to say that the book is very much from a child's perspective, kind of like a preteen going into teenage, that sort of perspective. And for that reason, it is very sort of, it doesn't have a filter. It's very blunt. All the experiences, all the feelings are very much at the forefront. You feel everything kind of without it being overanalyzed in a way. You find yourself having to reimagine how a child thinks, because a child, they're very observant, so they understand events and feelings and expressions, and they sort of understand all of that, but they don't necessarily understand the bigger picture, or the implications of everything, or the nuances. So it's sort of, it's kind of like it's not really the right context that they understand everything in, because they've not yet developed the ability to do so. But I absolutely fell in love with the tone. It has a young teenage girl's sort of angst and naivety and innocence, but also kind of this curiosity and need for new experiences, and then kind of the need to be validated as a worthwhile human being. And Tara, who is the protagonist, the young girl, she's kind of she needs more of that than the average teenager, because obviously she was abandoned by her mother as a child. So she's kind of, she feels like she's got this structural deficiency, this foundational problem, because, so she kind of finds that she needs to kind of substantiate her existence in a way. She needs to think that, my mother was a very important person. I'm not just nobody. I'm not just some abandoned person who is so ugly and so worthless that even their mother couldn't love them. So she kind of dwells into like a few kind of daydreams as well, in a way. So the tone is the first thing that drew me in, but then you also have kind of the rural setting, like a rural Pakistani setting. But in no other book and in no other work of fiction have I found it to be this immersive and acute and authentic. Although, to be fair, I don't know if I'm the best judge of that, having never spent any amount of time in the rural areas. But thanks to this book, I feel like I have. But it's not just, the specifics of, the appearance and everything. It's very much the soul that the author delves into. Kind of how, like, these people are kind of, in a way, boxed in. They're living cut off from modern technology, modern education, modern amenities in a way. And they're very much connected to the natural elements. They're connected to a more natural way of life, kind of, superstitious. And it's a small, but it's a very complex world, perhaps more complex than outsiders and their ignorance would assume. And then, there's other elements or forces rather at work in sort of in the backdrop. You have the shrine that the villagers go to solve their problems and to get kind of, to beg for forgiveness and to get hope. And, then you have it like a threatening cane field where there are murderous, mysterious boars, which obviously the villagers live in almost a constant fear of, and they keep a fire burning at night to ward them off. And then there are flies, which are magical flies, which kind of, they're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They kind of permeate every aspect of the villagers' lives. And it was interesting to me how the author chose this rather insignificant insect to kind of be almost like this puppet master, pulling the strings, this keeper of secrets, kind of like this, the flies are basically a servant. Basically, the flies are like servants of a force that is influencing events in people's lives. And now that I think of it, it probably does make sense that she chose them because, they're obviously unassuming in appearance. And you know how, like, you have that saying, walls have ears. It's like, flies, they can hear and see everything, but you don't necessarily notice them. And the other part, which I took an intense liking to right away, is that this is not a story of some poor, helpless, victimized bunch of women who must fight back against their circumstances or have some sort of epiphany and really stand up for their rights or whatever, and then or die trying. This is not a story of this is not a sob story, but it is also not necessarily a story of triumph. It is in that way difficult to categorize, which adds to its allure. We've all read novels from South Asia in which there's always some poor women that are being knocked about in some way, or like a main character that's like that. But this novel, for some reason, doesn't need to rely on that kind of formulaic setting. It's very powerful on its own. Of course, in general, there are undertones of the patriarchy. When the little girls play with dolls in the village, whoever has the male doll or like the boy doll, they're like, oh, I have more power. And Bibi Safia, who's the heiress, she kind of, her whole life she was controlled by her father and then by her husband, and it's only when both of them are dead that she can finally breathe. But for the most part, the women do seem to be in control. All the male characters are quite mild. They're kind of, they have a mild disposition, which was very refreshing for a reader. And the women, they seem to fear more the ravages of fate than the men. Interestingly enough, the men they're not oppressors, but they're also, they're not the saviors of, they're not the saviors, they're not the oppressors, they're not the protectors. They're kind of like in the background almost. Or perhaps that's because of the way the novel is written, that it's more of a women-centric kind of undertaking. It was very refreshing to see that the women were not fighting for a place at the table, as is the case with a lot of novels that one comes across. I tend to think that people that really are in control, they don't need to kind of assert their power through violence or through aggressive confrontation, or they don't need to sort of substantiate themselves really. But people that lack power, they need to assert it constantly. But in this story, because the women know that they are in control and then they can just tell the men what to do, there are no aggressive confrontations. But yet it is a kind of like a limited fishbowl world, isn't it? Which apparently the men can leave, like the character Taj, he leaves, but women are sort of bound to the land and they can't leave. And the cane field in the novel, the titular cane field, is also symbolic for that, isn't it? For boundaries, for control, for an elusive fear and threat. And I found that it ties into the concept of fate a bit, because it tells you, this is as far as you're going to get. And, this is where the invisible line has been drawn. You can't go further. You have to turn back. You have to accept defeat at this point. And you know how people talk about the concept of a glass ceiling sort of in economics. I'm a bit of an enthusiast of economics and I tend to put it in everything. So this is it's very much like that. There's this dialogue in the novel, I'm paraphrasing, that, whatever happens to you in life is kind of determined by where you were born and to whom. And that kind of sums it up very well, that it's this kind of, the book very much felt like a chess piece. There's obvious rules at play, whether they be the rules of fate or by forces that control or affect people's lives. And there's only so many moves you can make to kind of bypass what you have coming to you. It kind of felt like that, and for that reason I think that the novel is very well structured. It did occur to me, however, that people who perhaps are not looking at it in this sort of way, who perhaps don't have as much experience, they might find that, it's very slow moving. People tend to read novels and they want one tragic thing to happen after the other, or they want it to all be, flimsy, superfluous nonsense, or they want like action after action, or they want like a fast-paced situation. This book is not going to give you any of that, but what it is a very character-centric sort of narrative, very, very powerful, very earthy, very kind of connected with the land, connected with what's real. It kind of cuts through all the fluff, all this kind of semblance of life that we have created around technology. It brings you down to what you can imagine are the roots, how people are connected to the natural elements, how they are connected to the land, how there is so much that is not in their control. Because I find that with technology, with people that live in cities. We've kind of, we think that we've bypassed a lot of things in a certain way. We've kind of, found a way around them, but that's not necessarily the way life works. So I really loved it. I thought it was beautiful, and I'm a bit of a sucker for character centric novels in general as well. So I really like it. So I really liked it, and yeah, if you want to buy it, I'm going to leave a few links in the description where you can purchase it. You can buy it from Liberty Books. You can buy it from Folio Books, the Folio Books website, where I got it from. When I got it, there was a sale on the website, but I don't know if that's ongoing or. Also, I have purchased books from Pakistani publishers, but Folio Books, they really seem to have. I really like the design. I like the quality of the paper. So, it's very well done. Because a lot of Pakistani publishers, I find, they kind of skimp on the quality sometimes. So yeah, that's all, folks. Definitely give this a read. You'll really like it, and oddly enough, it will comfort you the way it comforted me. So give it a read. If anyone has read it, please leave your experience in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Take care.